Hello there again, travelers, and welcome back to the End of Time. One of the major reasons Chrono Trigger is beloved is for its alternate endings. It was a fairly revolutionary idea at the time. Using a New Game Plus as a tool, players can experience different outcomes for the game's finale by challenging Lavos at different intervals before he is faced in the original playthrough at the end of the story. This leads to all sorts of fun alternate outcomes that experiment with the idea of time travel, its effects on continuity, and the ways in which certain player decisions reap different consequences. One of my personal favorite alternate endings for the game, and a favorite of the game's director, Takashi Tokita, is the ending titled The Oath. Should the player choose to defeat Lavos after Frog is reunited with the Masamune, but before confronting Magus, you're greeted by a lovely scene in which our main heroes relax at Luca's house, their jobs completed. However, lamenting over his unfinished business, Frog leaves the affair alone in order to set out on a solo quest for vengeance. We then watch as Frog makes his way to Magus's castle, completely alone. He infiltrates its deepest sections, does away with Flea and Slash, and eventually reaches Magus himself. The ending is dark and dramatic. We are treated to some delightful dialogue between Frog and the various minions of Magus and his army, and I have to say, having the sound effects of the fateful clash between Frog and Magus echo through the credits in darkness, super effective in my opinion. But the best part about this ending, without a doubt, is, well, the ending. The game's final screen reads "The End" with a dark and moody shot of Magus's castle, as a lone figure stands atop, their cape blowing in the wind. What's so interesting about this ending to me, and others, is its ambiguity. The game makes it very blatant that the figure cannot be identified. Is it Magus? Is it Frog? Is it somehow someone else? We don't know for sure. I and many other fans are not alone in this assumption. Even the game's producers have confirmed that it's intentionally supposed to be ambiguous. You're not supposed to know who won the battle. Which leads to a very interesting question. Why the mystery? And who did win this epic clash? It may not seem to be worth exploring 26 years after Chrono Trigger has had its time in the sun, and sadly, we probably never will know the true answer. But I love this game, and I'd love to get others thinking about it. So here is my personal thought on just what happened at the end. I am in no way claiming this to be the canon outcome, and a lot of this is based on pre-established facts about Chrono Trigger's story, its characters, and its lore. In my opinion, there are only two likely outcomes, but not ones that are so simple, if that makes sense. I personally believe that the ambiguity is meant to imply a deeper meaning to this. Why make it a mystery otherwise? In other words, somebody did win the fight, but there's more to it than that. Outcome number 1. The same coin. Magus wins. Initially, the idea that Magus won the battle and defeated Frog is not one that seems super satisfying. It's tragic, sure, but it begs the question of why build it up in the first place like this. However, I do believe it's a distinct possibility. I think there's a good chance that even making it ambiguous in the first place suggests Magus may have indeed defeated our hero. But in my opinion, if this did happen, it won't be that he simply defeated Glenn and that's that. Instead, I see the first likely outcome as Magus having won, but the two came to some form of understanding between one another. Now, in no way am I saying they would come to a truce or that either would spare one another, but the possibility that dialogue opened up between them isn't impossible in my opinion. I feel that Magus may have won, but came to see something in Glenn, and vice versa. Frog and Magus are the classic example of a hero and villain who are two sides of the same coin. They both have a super similar narrative. They both desire revenge. Where they differ, however, is how far they are willing to go to achieve that. Frog has a sense of justice and propriety, being a knight in the Guardia army. His only goal is Magus and Magus alone. Magus, on the other hand, has lost all of his innocence. He's been corrupted by Ozzy and the other fiends. He will go to any length whatsoever to exact revenge on Lavos and find his sister. And it is entirely possible that the two characters came to this realization. I really like that idea. The idea that Magus would bother asking Frog anything isn't preposterous. Magus was never as invested in their rivalry as Glenn was. He very much had his own goal and just stuck to it. The idea of Frog coming back for revenge isn't even one he cared much to dwell on. In the original battle, Magus says, "Ah, that Frog of so many days ago, how have you fared?" Suggesting he doesn't necessarily even harbor any ill will toward him. Cyrus simply got in the way, and Magus does not care who he has to hurt to keep his goal alive. He also says, "Ah, the Masamune, so you have come for me," further suggesting he wasn't even aware of Glenn's plan. I could very much see him realizing that the two are not so unsimilar. So the idea that Magus wasn't so clouded by hatred toward Glenn, thus actually allowing him to see the similarities between them, isn't out of the question in my opinion. And I love the idea of the final battle evolving from a simple tale of good versus bad, but instead the battle of two wills. They simply know that one has to survive, and whoever does is destined to carry out their goal. Magus brooding atop his tower is not entirely out of character, but it does beg the question of why he'd do this after killing a person he never even cared for until now. It's my belief that this is Magus sitting atop the tower, standing deep in thought, or perhaps saluting his fallen rival who he came to respect. Outcome 2. The cycle continues. Frog wins. So, what if Glenn was the one who defeated Magus? What if our hero emerged victorious in avenging his lost friend and fulfilling his oath? Then my question is, why on earth would Frog of all characters choose to stand menacingly over the top of Magus's tower? It is certainly possible he's just doing it as a final means of reflecting on Cyrus and the memories they once shared, but notice the ending's tone. It is a very intentionally dark one. The final shot of our game is not one of beauty or triumph. It's very macabre and almost unsettling. Which is why I offer to the table the possibility that Frog did indeed win, but in doing so, he set his soul on a doomed course toward darkness. He has allowed his thirst for vengeance to corrupt him and place him on a grim path. It's a common trope we've seen all too many times in fiction, but I do feel it will be quite effective here as a cool alternate ending to Chrono Trigger. It is often said that revenge is a poison that sickens us and twists our soul. Is it perhaps possible that what we are seeing here is Glenn, now human, beginning his steps toward perhaps becoming the new Fiend Lord himself? There are a few reasons I believe this. There are tiny hints in the ending itself. Frog straight up murders Ozzy in this sequence, and this is the only time this happens. Magus also mentions that whoever wins the battle between them shall have the world and the future as their prize. And while Glenn does not initially say he desires such things, he does acknowledge that Magus is right. In most playthroughs of the original story, Frog comes to forgive Magus for what he has done. He realizes that killing him won't bring back Cyrus and will serve no purpose. He ends up relinquishing his quest for vengeance, and in doing so, eventually awakens the true power of the Masamune and saves the future from Lavos. This leads, in my opinion, to the most complete version of the game's story, in which Magus himself also joins the party. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Frog can also kill Magus and avenge Cyrus in the main game story as well, can't he? And you're absolutely right. However, there is one key difference between these two similar outcomes. In the original story, Frog fulfills his quest for vengeance among friends. And in the Oath, he achieves this while being completely alone, something the game makes very, very clear. It is entirely possible that it was the presence of friends among him who ultimately saved his soul and helped him from going to the dark side. I know I'm getting really hypothetical here, but hey, that's the fun of it. He valued friendship highly, as we saw in his relationship with Cyrus. But left in a state where he no longer has anyone to return to afterward? Well, that can certainly get to a person. The game has this odd little part before Frog sets out to kill Magus in Luca's house where he trips over some books before leaving, and everyone joins in on a laugh. I believe this was meant to be poignant. I believe it was supposed to symbolize what Glenn is now leaving behind forever. One final laugh amongst friends, who he could choose to spend the rest of his days with, but instead lets his desire to avenge Cyrus drive his motives. And after having become a killer, a man who let a thirst for bloodshed sate his appetite, and left with no one else to enrich his life afterward, he begins his descent into the dark side. A story about a character whose thirst for vengeance ended up corrupting them? Sound familiar? What do you think? Makes sense? Am I overanalyzing it? Or can you see the points I'm trying to make? You may be wondering what I truly believe is the correct ending. In my opinion, while both are likely, it's the second that seems to be suggested here. I believe Frog did indeed defeat Magus, but at the cost of his soul. I'd love to know what you think. If you like this sort of thing, be sure to subscribe for more. I also have tons of other gaming videos on video game fashion, and some try not to laugh stuff if you're into that. Have a great day, friends, and we'll see you next time here at the end of time.